All right. I watched this video, and you asked the question, or in the course of your discussion, it said, why don't you leave this group alone or that group alone? Well, that's a situation with Christians, isn't it? Christians are always reaching out. Christians are always trying to draw someone into this good news. The good news that there is something after this life, and that good news includes an eternity as part of God's family. And this Christianity explains how that occurs. God has provided a mediator between us and Him. And so that mediator would be effective, that mediator never sinned. Ever. Never had any inclination to sin. Just a man we refer to as Jesus. And because he never had any inclination to sin, and because God can determine, or He can see what we're capable of. Even before we were born, we were identified, and Jesus was identified. And among all life that would occur, Jesus was the only one who had no inclination to sin. So this is sound doctrine, by the way. You won't find this in a mainstream church, but you can derive it from Scripture. So what God did is He had pre-existent fellowship with Jesus in the process of creation itself. In other words, going from the spiritual realm to the realm of tangible things. So that's what Christianity is supposed to be about. God's provision for reconciling something that was flawed, something that had an inclination to do the wrong thing, to bring that person to the level of holiness, to understanding that it's harmful, it's hurtful to God to do wrong willfully. And once we realize, once we come to a desire to please God, to do the right thing, and realize that the provision for that transition is through Jesus Christ, therein is salvation. Now, so we're married. This problem has married us. Your quest for truth, my quest for brothers and sisters, has put us on a continuum. I don't want to lose track of you. I don't want to lose track of your audience. And I'm kind of doing damage control for real Christianity. You talk about not losing sight of the problem by looking at a symptom. Well, Christianity is not understood by just analyzing someone who calls himself a Christian. George Bush calls himself a Christian, but it's pretty easy to see that he is not loving his enemy. It's one thing to consider the Taliban your enemy or Al-Qaeda your enemy, but it's another thing to deal with them in a Christian way. And clearly George Bush is not doing that. So, is he a Christian? Not a very mature Christian. So, oh, and by the way, before I part, in an earlier video, I pointed out that the verse that talks about one Lord, one baptism, was in 1 Corinthians. It was among the letters of Paul, but in Ephesians. Just wanted to correct that. Well, we'll talk to you again.